Je suis Grégory Pouy et vous écoutez Vlan, un podcast pour vous aider à être plus serein en comprenant, avec nuance, le monde chaotique dans lequel nous évoluons. L'épisode que vous vous apprêtez à écouter est en anglais. Je vais essayer de le passer en français avec une IA, si j'y arrive. Vous l'aurez, sinon ça sera en anglais, malheureusement. Mais cet épisode est exceptionnel, donc je vous conseille vivement de l'écouter, principalement en anglais, parce que c'est la langue dans laquelle on a enregistré. Je passe en anglais. I am very overexcited, actually, to deliver this episode to you with Alain de Botton, who is one of the most articulated person on the topic of love. He actually wrote this book called The Course of Love that I had a few years back and that I love so much. He's also the founder of the School of Life, which is an amazing institution. And if you want to better understand the world we're living in, better understand the relationships yourself, the School of Life is probably the best way to go. Now, love is a topic that I've been, really deep diving, and because it is something that we are all wondering how it's evolving and how we can be happy with someone else. And we are answering all those very complicated questions. The 20, maybe 30 most important questions about love are tackled in this episode. And so I'm sure you will enjoy it so much. I'll let you watch it. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, but also to your YouTube channel. And I let you to this. Allez, Vlan, c'est parti. Hi, Alain. I'm so happy. I was telling you that, but I'm so happy to do this episode together. Thank you very much for being there with me.
It's a pleasure for me. Thank you for having me.
The first question I have, because that's one of the things that strike me the most when I listen to you, is how has the romantic ideal of a soulmate shaped our expectations of what love should be, and what do you think are the pitfalls of those expectations?
I mean, I think really what you're starting with is the idea that we don't love in isolation. For me, one of the most profound things that I've ever read is this wonderful quote by La Rochefoucauld. There are some people who would never have fallen in love if they had not heard that there was such a thing. I mean, what a beautiful idea. There are some people who would never have fallen in love if they hadn't heard there was such a thing. In other words, we all love within a context, within a societal context. And so we're encouraged. This is the strange thing about our emotions. Our emotions get subtle encouragement from the background in which we live. There are some societies that say, if you feel you love children, that's so important, go for it. If you feel some feeling of love for the divine, that's so important, that's the center of your life, and others that suppress and encourage different facets of our emotional life. So there's so much in us almost waiting for encouragement one way or another. And so, for example, if we live in a society that says, in order to have a good life, you should really be with someone who understands everything about you, everything that you feel, they must feel. And if they do that, they are a good person. And if they don't, they are a bad person. And you shouldn't try to use words to communicate. Maybe they just feel your soul intuitively. And it's just a beautiful connection of soul to soul. That's love. Now, if our society tells us this, which is, by the way, the romantic ideal, that's going to shape our expectations. We'll either think we're happy or unhappy according to this model. So, as I say, we really need to explore our background societal encouraging or discouraging models which are operating, because they're going to be doing so much of the work of, directing us in love.
But how do you take a step back from this romantic ideal that we all live in?
I mean, I think, it doesn't require particular, it's not a strenuous exercise. It's really just asking yourself very simple questions like, how do I think I will know when I am loved? You see, this feeling I have that I want love, well, how will I know if I got it? What will be the sign that I'm loved? What will that love feel like? And, if we got 20 people in a room and asked everybody to write down what it is that they would need to have in order to know that they're loved, we'd get different answers depending on where they come from in the world, their age, the music they've been listening to, etc. So we're highly suggestible creatures. Now, all of this should be encouraging. All of this should be hopeful, because it means that we can maybe free ourselves to love maybe in slightly different ways to the ways in which we think we have to love. Perhaps by becoming more conscious of some of the expectations that we've absorbed from our background, the environment in which we grew up, we might be freer to change those expectations and love in slightly different ways. This could open something up for us.
What do you think of falling in love? And, the description, I met a woman lately, and she said, well, it was just a 2 hours conversation. And she said, I don't feel it. I didn't have the butterflies, let's say. And I was like, but how do you know? I mean, after 2 hours, how would you be able to say whatever you're feeling? Because, it's just 2 hours. It's too short of a period to know what you're going to feel for someone. And so I wanted to understand what are your takes on butterflies in the belly, and what are you supposed to feel when you fall in love?
I mean, look, I think, one of our experiences, one of the sort of existential positions of human beings is loneliness on the one hand and an ache for connection. And if you think about the way in which, the human comes into the world, our earliest experience is that we are literally in the body of somebody else. We're not just with someone, we are inside someone. And so we go from being inside someone to being radically outside someone. And, the baby's cries of the newborn baby, for all of us, are very evocative of that primary tear away from, the familiar envelope into the kind of solitude and despair of, the real world, as it were, the world in which we're going to have to live until we die. And, somewhere along the way, the ache starts to return, to go back, to re-find this connection. Sometimes as small children, we get a teddy bear or a soft toy, and we envelop the soft toy. We curl up around this creature, and we recreate for them what we really want for ourselves. We hug the small soft creature as we would have wanted to be to be cuddled. And then in adolescence, as we emerge, 12, 13, 14, 15, we're growing, our bodies are growing, our bodies are changing. We start to ache for another body, another human. And, the fascinating thing is we are very selective. We don't just want this person or that person. It's that one, exactly that one. And we might see a face in the street or on the underground or on the bus or at school, and we think that's the person that, that can understand us, that can give for us, for our emerging adult selves, some of that feeling that we lost at the moment of birth, when we lost our original home. We think this is home for us. So the question I think you're asking is, well, why? Why is this person home? Why? And what we call the butterfly is that sense that it's home. So why? What is it that they are doing to give us a feeling of home? So I think that in some ways they are triggering a feeling of familiarity, because we've been at home before. And this person is reminding us in some way of home. Now, why are they doing this? It could be, and sometimes it is, something to do with their physical appearance. We've seen these eyes before. We've seen this hair color before. We've seen a certain angle of the neck, of the cheek, a certain molding of the ear, a certain smell maybe. We've been here before, and our unconscious remembers it. And so I think some of it is a physical recognition of some of the dimensions and features of that original physical home. And then there are psychological triggers that maybe they use a certain tone of humor. They tease you a little bit. This person has a laugh that seems maybe warm and inviting, but also incisive and clever about who we are. And we think, that's a little bit of me. That's a little bit of my past inside somebody else. And so we want to try and get closer to it. I think this is what the butterflies are.
Is it like a good feeling to follow, or is it something that can trigger you? I think I heard you saying that butterflies can also be the expression of fear somehow.
Well, this sits on a huge topic, you see, because I think what we're saying is that the way in which we love follows tracks laid down in early childhood. This is the major insight of 20th century psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. I mean, it's a founding belief. It's really one of the biggest ideas to have occurred in the 20th century in the humanities, you might say. And, because previous ages, there are echoes here and there, but really this is the foundational story of 20th century psychology. And your question is, well, are these feelings a good idea? So let's remember that for most of history, people had arranged marriages. So, your father or mother or village or whatever would arrange for you to marry X or Y person. And the reasons for that marriage were dynastic, essentially. This land and that land can come together and there's a bigger field, or this goat and that animal, whatever it is. So practical considerations. And then the Romantic movement of the 18th and 19th centuries goes against this and says, no, feeling must govern how we love and who we love. And when feeling is allowed to dominate, people will make wiser choices. Because previous to that, the agony of so many novels and plays and poems is all about, my father says I need to marry this person, but my heart says I want to marry that person, etc. And if only I could follow my heart, blah, blah, blah. It's the story. It's 1,000 stories. Suddenly this starts to change, gradually starts to change over this narrow period, 18th, 19th century. In 1750, it's one thing, and by 1870, it's another thing across Western Europe. It's a remarkable development, and then all around the world. And this has had very paradoxical results, much more complicated than we think, because following your heart does not necessarily lead you to happiness. This is what modern psychology tells us. Because when we love, we're loving what's familiar, but the familiar thing may not be good. I mean, let's take a classic tragic example. Your parent was an alcoholic. Your parent drank. And when they drank, they were violent and they made you feel unsteady and unsure. And one could think, well, the person who had this sort of upbringing will never want to go anywhere near anyone with an alcohol problem. It's clear that they will fall in love with, absolutely sober people. What do these statistics tell us? Exactly the opposite. Children of alcoholics overwhelmingly fall in love with people who have a drink problem or an addictive problem of some kind. And it could be subtle and it could be disguised, and it often is, and it often doesn't emerge immediately. But as I say, the statistics are terrifying. Why? What's going on? Is again because what you need to understand is that we are privileging attraction to familiarity over attraction to what we would otherwise think, and the Romantic movement thought, which is an attraction to happiness. We are not attracted to being happy. We're attracted to being familiar. Sometimes the two go together. Sometimes mummy or daddy were absolutely lovely. And so this sets us up really well to fall in love with really lovely people. And we do that. But a lot of the time, we don't. We fall in love with patterns of frustration, which we knew in the past, and we are back there again in the present.
I've noticed that a lot of people say what they would love for them, and what triggered them is very different. And it's exactly what you're explaining. Basically, you can be you can want something for yourself, and eventually you will be always triggered by the person that are absolutely not what you are describing as a person.
And it's, it's literally maddening and an insult to reason and an insult to our adult capacities, because we tell ourselves, enough of suffering. I'm going to go for somebody, let's say, who loves in a warm and reliable way. And we go out in the world, we get the dating apps, we go for dinner, and we meet someone and they seem warm and reliable, etc. And we start the relationship, and 6 months in, or a year in, or 3 years in, we realize, hang on, it's a bit problematic. This person's not actually that reliable. Unusually, especially the more the relationship's building, they're withdrawing, they're taking distance, they're doing to me what happened with my mother. And you think, oh my goodness, and the last 3 partners. And you think, I'm here again. And I think we need, you laugh just now, we need to laugh, we need to have compassion, we need to take it very slowly, we probably need a very good therapist, we need to watch ourselves, we need to really take care.
So should we follow our intuition? Because a lot of people say, love is about intuition, you should follow your, but eventually...
We need to submit our intuitions to a lot of analysis. I mean, I think the notion that intuition is a superior guide, oh, no. I'm not a romantic in this sense. No, I think we will have intuitions. We can't disregard them. They are guiding us. But we should submit them to a lot of exploration. We should also keep good records. I mean, this is what people forget to do in relationships. They get into a relationship and they fail to notice what's actually going on and what they're feeling. So maybe they're suffering a lot. Well, write it down. Remember that you are suffering and why you're suffering and what's going on. Because then the relationship continues, etc. And people forget, or maybe the partner breaks up and then you're alone again and you think, oh, I miss this person. I miss them so much. I want someone just like them. You want to go, okay, hang on. Let's go back to our records. What was actually going on in this relationship? I always think a good rule of thumb is trust what you felt then, not what you imagine now. Trust the data that came at the moment, because, our minds are very watery places. We humans are made mostly of water, and our minds are mostly fluid, dark, confused places. It is no insult to the human animal to emphasize the extent to which we are irrational, in the dark, unable to understand who we are, and swimming blind. It's kind to us to acknowledge this and not to assume that we are more adult and more capable than we are. We aren't.
There is this book, French book, that you might have heard of, that is Love Lasts for 3 Years. And he's talking about romantic love. I would like to have your take on that.
Look, I'm a pessimistic person, and I like dark thoughts. One of my favorite quotes is from the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca. He says, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? He says the whole of it calls for tears." Very nice, very dark, somber truth. However, I mention this because this chap, who I don't know this book. Luckily, it's not been translated to English.
Well, you speak French, so
I know.
Could have read it.
It's too dark. It's too dark. I can't take it. Right. We're speaking. It's 11:20 on a Friday morning. I can't take this truth. I want to believe that it's longer than that. Look, does great sex last that long? Does the butterfly last that long? We can talk. We can invite Esther Perel to have some say on this, etc. But let's imagine that some moods can't. But can love last longer? Sure, it has to be able to, because I'll tell you why. Because our tastes as human beings don't change that radically. If we found it charming, the way that someone arranges a room or prepares a meal or discusses things with a child or with you, if we like their sense of humor, if we appreciate the perceptive way in which they discuss political matters or observe dynamics in an office, etc., these things won't disappear after 3 years. I mean, we don't change friends every 3 years. And I think what I'm saying really is that many components of love have similarities with components of friendship. And we can love our friends, and we can hopefully be friends with our lovers. And those things are not prone to the seasonal change. So, let's put this man Is it a man? Probably a man.
It's a guy. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a guy.
yeah.
So let's put this man aside for the moment. In order to live, we need certain illusions, as Nietzsche pointed out. We need certain illusions, maybe.
So going to illusion, to expectations, what should be realistic expectations of love, of relationship?
Okay, look, I don't think we can expect to find someone completely sane. Everybody's crazy. So what really matters is not to find a sane person, but to find someone with an ability to explore their insanity with reasonable maturity. We want someone to be able to say, I will lose my mind just a little bit ahead of the moment when they actually lose their mind. And when they've lost their mind, we want them to be able to go, I'm really sorry. I know I was a little crazy last night. I've had a think. It's because of this, that, and the other. And I'm going to try and do better. So we don't need people to be perfect. We need people to understand their imperfections and to warn us of them, to apologize for them, etc. I think that's the best we can do. And for this, it helps, I'm almost describing what you might call a therapeutic relationship, where you kind of have what you might call a therapeutic understanding of your problems. You know how you emerged into adulthood, you know your neuroses a little bit, you know that you're frightened of intimacy. But it's so much better to have someone who says, I'm frightened of intimacy, than someone who acts out that fear by not answering your calls, by having an affair, by whatever. It really helps to have a narrative accompanying the madness that's inside everyone.
Coming back to meeting someone, we talk a lot about red flags and green flags. And according to what you were saying, because we cannot make sense with our mind, meaning like we can't really trust what we are feeling. Is there anything that we should pay attention? I feel like, for example, at the beginning, people actually tell us truly who they are if we listen carefully. And if you ask the right questions. But I was wondering about those green flags and red flags, or what you have to say about what I just said.
Look, I think it's a very interesting topic. And, even if one doesn't like the language, it's a very useful term. Of course, there are things to look out for. And, early dinner dates are essentially interviews, and they're psychological interviews. And we should pay enormous attention. So I think you're asking, what should we be looking out for? What should we be asking? Well, I think we need to ask anyone that we are dating or thinking of dating for their life story. Where have you emerged from? You want to ask very carefully about their relationship with their mother and father. I think you really want, let's say you're heterosexual, it's a heterosexual couple, heterosexual relationship. You want to ask about the relationship with the other sex parent. How did you get on with your dad? How did you get on with your mum? What was it like? And, it's a foundational relationship. I'm not, the conclusions we draw need to be nuanced. The answer is not totally simple, but it's definitely a data point that we need, and we should probably feel quite reassured and happy if the person we're dating got on well with, mother or father. It's a good and encouraging first step. We don't need to run away if not, but, by the way, we should also take a careful look of, are they able to engage in this discussion? Or do they go, I don't know? Do they constantly saying, I don't know, or I've never thought about that? When we say, what makes you anxious? If they go, I don't know, ooh, that's a deep question. Really? How often do you go inside yourself? I think we should be reassured by someone who is able to explain how, in their view, they are formed, who they are, etc. These are very useful things. So I would say that. I've now forgotten what we're saying. So anyway, that's the beginning of red flags, green flags. I mean, essentially, we want to find out. Love is very frightening. I mean, let's remember, we want to try and connect ourselves at depth with another human, but very often when we try to do this in childhood, something went wrong. for many people, let's say half the population, has had a bad experience of trying to connect with a close adult. Maybe that adult died. Maybe they left. Maybe they were always angry. Maybe they were depressed. Maybe they made them feel guilty. Maybe they made them feel shame. All of these things. If this was our experience of trying to connect, we're likely to carry that fear and that anxiety into adulthood. So at least 50% of us are wandering the world thinking, when I get close to someone, thinking unconsciously, when I get close to someone, I get into trouble. Wow, it's difficult. That's difficult. So, and even if the person wants to love, and most people do, 99% of people do want to love, there is a terrible obstacle. Okay, let's go somewhere really weird. Sexual perversion. What are sexual perversions? If you read the sexual perversion psychoanalytically, they are almost always expressions of terrors of intimacy. Take the flasher. What's a flasher in French?
Flasher.
Who flashes their raincoat and shows you their body naked, often a man.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the expression in English. A flasher is a exhibitionist.
Exhibitionist. Okay, so the guys who go to the Bois de Boulogne and they open their raincoat, etc. What is this? What are they doing? What is going on here psychologically? And has it got anything to tell so-called normal people? Well, absolutely. What this person is expressing in a very extreme form is a terror of intimacy. They are opening their raincoat, showing you their naked body. They cannot bear a mutual relationship. They can only tolerate a power dynamic. I will impose my desire and sexuality on you. I will frighten you. Why? Because the guy is so frightened himself. He's frightened, but he's trying to direct the fear outwards. He cannot take a mutual relationship. The thing that this person would fear most of all is if someone said to them, "Oh, you look nice. Let's go to a hotel. Let's become partners. Let's get married." This person will run away. This is the person they're most frightened of, right? Because, anyway. So they are showing in an extreme form the terror of mutual love, the terror of two people looking each other in the eye and mutually sort of engaging with each other. And all sexual perversions are terrors of intimacy. The voyeur, with a telescope far away, he needs to be a kilometer away from someone because he's so terrified of intimacy that he needs to be far, far away. Let's take the most tragic case, the sex murderer, someone who has sex and then kills the victim. Why? What's going on here? Terror of intimacy. The person needs to murder, has to kill the person who looked in their eye and witnessed their desire. It is a feeling of shame in the murderer at who they are that is redirected and leads to murder. Why do people have sex with animals? What is that? Why have sex with a dog, with an animal, with a cow? Because the animal does not know who you are. They can't look in your eye and be with you. It is a radical denial of mutuality. So this is what lies behind so-called sexual perversions. But it's the same thing as the lover who sleeps with someone and then goes, "Oh, I must go. I'll call you tomorrow," and never calls. Because the moment there is connection, there is terror. And then that person needs to run away. And even in so-called good relationship, there is this. There is always two things in play: a desire for connection and a terror of engulfment and loss of self in the other. And in a good relationship, those terrors are managed. Someone is able to both get close and remain themselves. They don't think it's a binary choice. Either it's me or it's you. No, we can become a we, and there is safety in that. But this is the result of it's a psychological achievement, and not everyone can manage it.
Actually, I want to write a book about the society. And the idea is that the consumption society, but mostly what happened with digital, was a seamless life. So, Uber, Airbnb, all those services are super, what we call frictionless. Well, that's how we call them in the digital era. And I feel like people are looking for a seamless life. And they want to have a seamless partner. And if anything is not perfect, they'll leave. And I was wondering what is your take on this evolution? I mean, not even talking about the dating apps that are a supermarket for meeting people, which is probably not the best way to do that. But I was wondering about how do you actually stop on someone and not like gather and, collect people because they're not perfect?
I mean, look, let's be optimistic about technology for a moment. I know that sounds kind of weird, but let's imagine that we are just at the beginning of using technology to facilitate relationships. Mm-hmm. And we're at a very clumsy early moment, which has led to certain sort of, if you like, kind of decadent expressions, like people who, swipe so much in apps, or certain excesses of pornography, etc. These are early frictions, let's imagine. So how could technology actually assist us in love? Well, let's imagine, for example, an AI that is listening to a couple all the time and that is registering all the time what is being said and not said and is interested in the couple surviving and thriving. It will say to us, you are not using words of affirmation. You are failing to notice that someone is trying to tell you something. You're failing to notice it. They've 3 times mentioned their father and you haven't said anything. They've 4 times mentioned the word freedom and you didn't notice. So artificial intelligence, it should not be an insult to say we are not very intelligent most of the time. So it should not be a problem to have some kind of external support in the same way that we can't go very fast. So we invented the car to take us further, or the aeroplane. Well, our brains can't go very fast. So we invented a computer that maybe help us to perform certain functions. And one of the functions it can do is to be vigilant as to what we are saying and doing and listening in a relationship. As for the process of matching, I mean, current dating apps are, we know, hopeless in this, but the promise, and partly their financial model relies on being hopeless. But let's imagine how to do this intelligently in time. Once we understand a little bit better, we know that there are better and worse matches for people. We know that some people are good for us and not good for us. If we get a little bit cleverer about arranging that process, we will take away. I mean, currently dating apps are, primitive in the extreme in who they present.
It's very physical, basically.
It's very physical. All the psychological questions are extremely naive, etc. And as I say, that's because that's their business model. Their business model is that you will fail to find the right partner and you will keep going. I mean, what they essentially want to do is to give you constant experiences of failure and then a constant promise of doing better next time. So it's like a gambling machine. And the gambling machine is, the promise is you're going to make money, but not right now. Please give us a bit more money. And then you keep going. And the dating app is exactly the same. So you will get happiness, but not right now. Come back and we'll show you 22 other people who are also wrong. And we know that they're wrong, but we're pretending they're right to keep you going. Does that mean there isn't a better or worse person? There, of course, better and worse people. It's just, we haven't, but look, capitalism does this all the time. We shouldn't panic. There's time. Entrepreneurs will hopefully be listening to this, wondering what they should do with their lives. If you're clever at computer coding, there's a job for you. And, we need to go forward here.
That's perfect. I've heard you said that love was a skill. More than a skill, it was an enthusiasm. And I was wondering, what are the core skills of love and how one can cultivate them?
Okay, let's talk about Freud here and the Oedipus complex. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Oedipus complex is one of the weirdest concepts. It's, people say as a joke, you want to sleep with your mother, you want to sleep with your father as a child. It seems so weird what's going on here. If we look at it properly, what it gives us is a model for the skill that you will need to emerge into adulthood as someone who is sexually / psychologically mature to meet and connect with another person. Let's describe what needs to go on, because this is really what Freud had in mind, but he described it quite badly. He didn't write very well, I don't think. Like many thinkers, Spinoza, they don't say what they don't say what is really best in their thought. So it requires a little bit of commentary here. So I think what Freud was trying to say is that in order to become a normal adult, as it were, a healthy adult, a little boy has to have a very particular experience around his mother. he needs to notice that his mother recognizes his potency, his charm, his desirability as a little boy and as a proto-adult and as a human. The message has to be something like, if you weren't my son, and if you weren't 5 years old, and if I wasn't 45, you'd be a lovely person. I really like you. You know, you're a lovely, lovely chap. And that feeling is a very important feeling. But it's surrounded by two dangers, okay? One danger is that the mother, the parent, and it happened, I mean, I'm describing it, you know, with a boy in a heterosexual version, but there are all sorts of versions of this.
Sure.
The mother will seduce her son, that there will be an actual seduction or emotional seduction, either a physical seduction or an emotional seduction. Oh, your father doesn't really understand me. Oh, we're a team. We're close. You're my little buddy. And it goes too far. It crosses a boundary. Either, as I say, in the physical, which is completely tragic, totally tragic because it just messes people up for the whole of their life, or there's an emotional seduction, which is also pretty tragic. Sometimes also because it can't be noticed. You don't know it's happened, but it has happened, and it's why you can't form relationships. So that's one kind of tragedy, and then the other tragedy is often in relation to that fear and that danger, the parent is so cold and is so standoffish and disregards the child so much that they have no sense of validation, no sense of their own potency, no sense of their desirability, and they have a very hard time. They either chase that desirability constantly through manic seduction, or they withdraw completely and cannot form bonds with others. So you asked about the skills. You know, I'm just describing one, we could go on all day, just one kind of skill. Skill is the wrong word. One kind of lucky childhood that you can have that either endows you with a capacity to do what you're going to need to do, which is be present with someone, be potent with someone, etc. But, you know, there are so many things. I mean, take what get called communication skills. You know, one of the skills of love is being able to say to a person, this is how I feel. So I'm with you, you're my lover. I feel angry today. I feel angry with you because you did not ask me about my aunt yesterday, and I'm offended. You seem selfish and horrible. Now, there are some people who will be able to say gently but firmly, this is how I feel, this is why, and this is, you know, etc. And then there are others who will not even know that they are upset. It's not that they know they're upset but haven't told you. No, they don't even know they're upset. And they don't know they're upset because no one was ever interested in their feelings. So they have not had the experience of being interested in their own feelings, because we're only interested in our feelings if somebody else was interested in our feelings first. We understand from the concern of others how to be concerned for ourselves. If no one was ever concerned for ourselves, we're not concerned for ourselves. And so we don't know how to communicate hurt. And then we don't know how to communicate. And then the feeling is there, but it's unconscious, and it blocks the channels of feeling. And then someone is furious, but they don't know it. And they start to have nightmares, and sex becomes impossible, because how can you have sex with someone you're angry with? But what can you do about anger if you don't know you're angry? And on it goes. So lots of skills, lots of problems when those skills are missing.
Is it gender bias, meaning that men were taught that feelings, you know, my experience is that men have a hard time describing their feelings. They have a very few words, basically most of them, to describe their feelings. So I was wondering, to what you were describing, if men were more inclined not to be able to know what they're feeling, and so having a hard time communicating them.
I mean, look, I think, you know, there's a terrible societal bias. Let's put it plainly. Often there's a problem of heterosexual men, because heterosexuality is read as something that has a particular relation to vulnerability, which is associated with the feminine. So, in other words, you become a man in the stereotypical heterosexual journey, and, you know, children in the playground will go, you know, little Gregory is crying, and then they'll say Gregory is a girl, because he is crying, you know. So this sets up a kind of, you know, model. I mean, I'm mostly not condoning it, but this is what the story is, and so it becomes then very hard, because the young man grows up thinking, I can only be a man if I forget certain parts of myself, which is what makes often conversation between heterosexual men so boring, literally boring, because how are you can only be answered in a very limited spectrum. I mean, you can't say most of what you are. What am I? I'm impotent. My penis doesn't rise. You can't say this to another man because it's like you're Hannibal. You're the conqueror. You can't say this. You're Julius Caesar. So you can't do this. So a lot of what makes life interesting is outside of the discussable. And so when this person finds themselves in a relationship with a man or a woman, it can be very dull. Yeah.
I was wondering, going into couples, how can you, as a person, handle the flows or the craziness, as you said earlier, of the partner? Because you will eventually find it.
I mean, what you have to hope is that it's a partner who is able to respond to feedback and observations about who they are without feeling that their world is falling apart, without feeling that they are being existentially attacked and annihilated. Now, for some people, this is precisely what any criticism feels like. That if somebody says, I'm not sure about those shoes, they don't think you've said, I'm not sure about those shoes. They think you've said, you're a piece of shit who deserves to die. Now, you haven't said that, but that's how they hear it. And they hear it for a very simple and poignant and tragic reason, which is that that's how once someone did speak to them. That is how they were once attacked. And they did fall apart. So the tragedy that they fear is a tragedy that has already happened to them, but they don't remember it. And so it constantly stays in the present because it's actually in the past and they can't access that past. And so, we have to hope that this person has a good therapist, is willing to go to therapy, and is willing at least to get to the stage where they think, okay, when you said to me, please shut the door a little bit more quietly because someone's trying to sleep upstairs, I wasn't saying you're an ugly, awful person. I wasn't saying that. I know it's how you felt, but it's not what I meant. And if the couple is able to do that kind of mental maneuver, that's a really good sign. But, if it doesn't work, and if you're over a certain age and you have some options and some time, probably you should leave. You should say to this otherwise very nice person, look, there's a communication problem here. Every time I say something to you, it becomes an argument. And, look, let's talk about simplicity in relationships. We human beings have a great appetite for complex things. We love complicated things. The ethics of Spinoza, astrophysics, molecular biology. We love complicated things. We think, this is good, it's exciting, because I think we recognize in complication some of the kind of mysteries of the universe and our own ineffable mysteries. We get in touch with something that seems very noble, and it's sort of true. But our respect for complexity can sometimes lead us into trouble when we end up in a relationship where 4 times a week we're having 3-hour discussions about what a word means and what they meant and what you meant. And maybe, once a week we're up till 3 a.m. having a very difficult conversations. And then we're wondering why they didn't call. And we're telling our therapist that we don't know why they didn't call. And we're worried about their friend and when they're going on holiday and all the rest of it. At some point, we may need to respect simplicity and have a rule of simplicity, which is, at some level, if they know how to love and love us, and we know how to love and we love them, there should be an element of simplicity to the whole task. Of course, it's hard to raise a child, to move in together, to share a bathroom. Yeah, there's certain kinds of logistical things. But let's also remember the importance of a certain amount of simplicity, because sometimes complexity is a sign of nothing less than that we should not be somewhere with the person.
Pretty clear. And is it what you would describe as mature love? Like what you just described? Like, is it what you would call mature?
Mature love? Yes, I think so. I think there is such a thing as mature love. and there are features of mature love. In mature love, you know how to apologize. You know how to separate out what they're doing from what you're doing. You're able to separate out the past and the present. You're able to separate out the woman in front of you or the man in front of you from your mother or your father. You're able to separate out the anger that belongs to a friend or a colleague at work with the anger or the situation that is demanded by your partner. These are all maneuvers of a mature mind. And yes, it's lovely if someone looks sexy and if they're fun and they're dramatic, etc. But ultimately, the real adventure is to connect at depth in a calm way, actually, with another human being. And, there are a lot of people out there are immature. I mean, imagine you are an Olympic, runner. If you go out into the world, not many people can run. And you're not surprised about that. You think, I'm doing this professionally. I'm doing this, for the Olympics. I don't worry that most people can't run. Imagine if you're trying to join, not the Olympic team, it's a little bit too ambitious, but let's say you're a regional team. You're trying to achieve a certain standard in love. Well, it may mean that not everyone can be on your team. It may mean that you've developed skills and capacities that mean that, some people you should say, I'm so sorry, you're not going to be right for me because I've taken certain steps and you haven't.
I was also wondering, because I've experienced that, but also I've seen that a lot, dynamic within a couple can evolve, which means that when you are a certain age, there's a dynamic that takes place. And then because you grow up and maybe because you worked on yourself with a therapist, an amazing one like you, like Esther, or maybe you can help, and you want to change that dynamic. But this is, I feel, maybe I'm wrong, but this is the hardest thing to do, like to change a dynamic within a couple.
Well, it's very hard to order, isn't it? It's very hard to force people to change on our schedule, to say you must change. People do change, but they change generally when they want to and not under any kind of pressure. And this is the tragedy of so many relationships where, someone needs to develop, but the other partner is firstly calling for that development so fast that it becomes impossible because they're saying, you shit-faced, you must develop. And if somebody's insulting you, you can't change because you're too scared. So we need encouragement, we need love, we need time to change. And sometimes there isn't an opportunity for this because we all have a limited time on the planet and maybe we don't have time for this. And so sometimes people do say to me, can people change? Yes, of course they can change. There wouldn't be psychotherapists if people couldn't change. Of course they can change. But can they change by tomorrow or on schedule or in the next 3 months? Probably not. And the more you ask them insistently or angrily, the less they're likely to be able to change. So this is why it's so difficult. And as you say, many couples do fall apart because one person is moving ahead faster. Someone once said, we tend to fall in love with people who are at the same level of emotional maturity as us intuitively. So we don't fall in love with people the same age as us. We fall in love with the same age at an emotional level of maturity. So, a 20-year-old can fall in love with a 40-year-old because they're actually the same age at an emotional maturity. Or two people can meet at 25 and then one person by 32 is at one place. In an inward sense, they're at 50, and in an inward sense, the other one has gone back to 8. There can be regression as well. So I'm exaggerating, but you see the point that emotional maturity is also measured in ages, and they have very little to do with chronological ages.
And can we accelerate the process in the other? Or how can you, because you said you cannot force someone to change. So maybe you can say, go see Alain de Botton as a therapist and maybe try to accelerate, or maybe see a couple therapist you were talking about AI doing that, but
you're touching on a very vulnerable spot in me because again, my optimistic side, which enables me to get out of bed in the morning, is that I really, really want to believe that words, discussion, podcasts, arguments, not fighting arguments, but arguments on a page, etc., can help people to develop. That's what motivates me and lots of other people like 100%. Me. We believe in dialogue. But the truth, the bitter truth, which I think we also have to accept, is that dialogue won't always work. And it's part of emotional maturity to recognize that there are people that you can make the most amazing speech to. You can be as poetic as, I don't know, Racine, as intelligent as Freud, as sophisticated as I don't know what, and you will not get there. It doesn't matter. You can have the arguments of Shakespeare, the logic of Tolstoy. You won't make any progress because people are not only operating at an intellectual, rational level. You're dealing with an emotional mind. And trauma, what we might call trauma, shuts doors in people's minds. So that a so-called very intelligent person can be at an emotional level entirely closed and unable to absorb certain ideas, not because they're evil, not because whatever, but they just can't do it. And it is naive to suppose anything else. And some of the reason is just aesthetic. It's a visual problem. If you see somebody with very thin arms, you can go, they won't be able to pick up a javelin and throw it because you can see that they don't have the physique.
The body. Mm-hmm.
But we don't have such obvious external markers. And so we end up in a situation where we think, you're intelligent, you're nice, you're well-meaning, please understand something. And they go, no. Or they don't even say no. They say, yes, I have understood it, or that's a strange thing, whatever, but they can't understand it. And it can take years for us to realize, and some of the most painful breakups that couples have to go through is when one person just has to go. This lovely person who I love in many ways, who's wonderful in many ways, they cannot understand something, even though they may want to. They can't get it. And so I, in order to save myself, have to leave them. I don't want to leave them. I will have to leave them because they don't understand. It's very disappointing. But I think we have to prepare ourselves when we go into love that we may be in such a situation.
Before we go into breakups, because I also want to talk about that, I wanted to talk about sexuality. And you can be within a very loving couple, and yet the sexual desire is disappearing because it's been a long time. How can you increase, or I don't know, fire up the sexual desire? Or how do you keep up over time?
Yes. Look, others have said this. We mentioned Esther. Look, the way I see it is I think there is a real conflict between the desire to seem respectable, good, kind, mature, and the honest sharing of our sexual reality. There is a conflict between this. That sex is a strange force within us, which makes us want to do things that don't sit entirely normally with other parts of our lives. The respectable lawyer at night wants to be flogged. The responsible politician wants to shout insults at an intern. Or it's unusual. And the odd thing that can happen is that when we're in a relationship with someone, we need them a lot. We need them so much that we can't take a risk. We can't take a risk that they will think that we're perverted or strange or horrible, etc. So we have to hide more and more of ourselves in order to protect the connection with the person that we love. It's kind of ironic. But the irony is that sex would also help us to connect. But if we were really honest about our sexual desires, we risk losing some elements. And we're not wrong. It's sentimental to think, there's a happy ending and there's absolutely no conflict. There is a conflict. Many people find that the thing that most excites them sexually is to go and sleep with somebody else. Well, how can you tell the person that you really love that you want to sleep with somebody else? They will get hurt. They will suffer. And, sometimes our modern world is too utopian in this. And all these things of polyamory and all of it. It's beautiful. It's lovely. Is it happy? I've come across personally too many situations where I've seen blood on the carpet, terrible, Terrible outcomes of this. Couples who go, we're going to do away with jealousy. Jealousy is a capitalist construction. It doesn't belong here. We're going to have as many partners as we like. We're all going to be happy. And what do you get? You get friends who call you up in the middle of the night going, I can't take this. I'm going crazy. I've ruined my life. Personal experience. And I'm a little bit fed up with it because I really...
No, I fully agree.
I've had to hold a lot of hands on this one. So look, it may work for some people. If you're having a happy polyamorous arrangement, congratulations, fantastic, great, and don't write into this program and complain because you're having a nice time. But for many people, it's really conflictual. So what I'm saying, I suppose, is there are things that we want sexually which come into conflict with the things that we want in terms of a loving union. Is there an easy answer? I mean, I've even heard of people who say things like, we're going to have a radically honest relationship. Tell me everything you feel. I'll tell you everything I feel. And we're going to go for it. And even then, people lie to each other because what excites them and what they're interested in is lying. They actually want to have a secret. It's not what the secret's about. It's the capacity to have a private life that someone doesn't know about. That's what's exciting to them. So look, the human mind is very, very complicated. The best that I can do for you, the best that I can do for your listeners is to suggest that sometimes there are bits of our imagination that we can share without causing catastrophe and that we haven't yet, maybe because we're a bit unfairly shy, but if we do it, it could be okay. We could go to a hotel. Hotels are always good. We could take a break from the routine, go to a hotel and ask ourselves to explore some of the stranger, more unusual aspects of our sexual desires and to imagine that our partner, who we think we know too well, actually is still a stranger in many ways, and there's still a lot to learn. This definitely can happen as well.
And because you talked about open relationship, I was wondering, and I'm sure you've noticed that, I was wondering, why is it that so many people, and from my experience, men in heterosexual relationship, want to have an open relationship now? Is it because of individualism? How do you explain this? It feels weird to me. Maybe I'm too old. I don't know.
Well, look, it's not modern in the sense that if you look at history, many societies have shown mostly men, very occasionally women, in positions of high status, having multiple partners. This is something that history shows us. Yeah. So it's evidently something that lingers in the human soul, and historians of financial structures will emphasize that the bourgeois marriage has an economic basis. We don't want to split the farm between too many people. We want to arrange money, et cetera. So there's incentives coming from somewhere other than the emotional sphere for a settled union. But as finances change, as the ability to arrange things financially changes, so too it becomes less important to have exclusive relationships. So back to La Rochefoucauld, there are some people who would never have heard there was polyamory, or some people who never heard there was monogamy, etc. It slightly depends on where you are. And we're now living in a world where that's more possible. So we're finding naturally some people able to express that wish in a way that they didn't even know before. But as I say, I mean, there remain complexities. People are the offspring of one mother and one father, not 22 mothers, not 22 fathers. Again, from a Freudian point of view, this sets up challenges. You both want an exclusive relationship with one parent, and you want to get rid of the parent and and say, I don't care for mummy. Who cares about daddy? I want other people. It's a sign of independence. It's a sign of your maturity psychologically. It can be for some people. So this explains the yin and the yang of the one and the many, always.
If I'm not mistaken, you've written that most love stories end too early. And I was wondering, how do you make sure that it doesn't happen? Is it about making efforts? Is it about understanding the other? I mean, we discussed that a little bit, but you also said earlier that sometimes, when the person is not at your stage of love maturity, you should probably leave. So,
I meant by ending love stories, most filmmakers, etc., that the moment that it's the end, it's when the couple comes together, when they finally decide,
totally.
But you don't see them 20 years later still making the meal in the kitchen, etc., etc. You don't see them sending the children to school, etc. And that's partly an artistic problem. But I think the artistic problem then becomes a more general societal problem, because we fail to aestheticize the everyday. And because we haven't aestheticized the everyday, we can shun the everyday. We can condemn the everyday as not interesting. And, the classic novel in this is Madame Bovary. The problem with Madame Bovary is that she's reading the wrong books. She's reading books that tell her that her life is boring. If she had read a book, maybe written by Flaubert, that describes the beauty, the nobility, the dignity of an everyday life with a not ostensibly exciting person who nevertheless has a core of value that is very important, maybe she would be reconciled to her so-called ordinary circumstances. So in other words, if we're watching the films of Éric Rohmer, we can accept daily life because this is what this genius filmmaker shows us. He shows us the intricacy. He gives us patience for ordinary conversations. But if all we're watching is Gladiator 1, 2, 3, 4, and 10, then we want life to be on a heroic scale, and we come home and we say that you're a ridiculous person, you're not as beautiful as so-and-so, as strong as so-and-so, etc. So we need to be very careful what works of art we are taking in, because it will help us, it will guide what we think of as important.
Actually, I've seen people want passionate love, and I've experienced it. That's how I've met Esther, actually. That was the context of it. And that was I don't know about bad experience, but I wouldn't recommend it. And yet people are looking for it very much. And yet that's also because of movies and all the imaginary around what love should look like.
I mean, I guess I wonder what you mean by passionate love. I mean, I'm no enemy of passionate love. But let's think about what it means to be passionate. What we mean is, wonderful love plus, right? Now we may associate that with people tearing off their clothes, pushing against the wall, unable to get through a meal without making love yet again. And we have a very predominantly physical model of this. But let's imagine a psychologically passionate relationship where two people are longing to come together again at the end of the day so they can talk once again about their childhoods together. So they can once again read a text by Freud and discuss what it means to them and etc. That they are so excited to follow their evolution as emotional beings that they can't wait to discover yet again some aspects of their psychological makeup, etc. This can be passionate too. And, it can be great. So let's not be cynical about passion, but let's ask, what do we mean that we're passionate for? And maybe less about getting naked, well, that's kind of interesting as well, but more about getting psychologically naked, which I think is the true adventure. And I think that never gets boring. Never.
And I was wondering then, going into breakups, why those deep love can actually become strangers at some point. And is that a healthy thing to have a former lover become a stranger?
I mean, look, heartbreak is awful. I mean, we sometimes it seems almost silly and there are songs and et cetera, and it can seem something a little bit, I don't know what, adolescent or whatever, but it's a very serious condition. I mean, some people kill themselves because their partner's left. And it is like losing a person to death. It is a kind of death. If you have loved someone and they have been part of your life, maybe for a long time, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, and that person leaves, that person says, I'm sorry, I'm going, I don't feel the feeling anymore. This is one of the most awful things that can happen to a human being. It is devastating. It will take you months, perhaps years, perhaps you will never overcome it. It is an enormous thing. So let's not minimize it. It's a very serious topic. Many of the people who need the greatest psychological help are precisely people who have lost someone. It's very, 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 very difficult. It gets more difficult the more we don't understand why. Why did the person leave? There are rules for leaving people. There are better and worse ways to do it.
You mean like a text on WhatsApp?
Well, it doesn't matter the technological medium. It's more, have you explained it to the person? Can they understand it? It could be on WhatsApp. It's not the WhatsApp that's the problem. You can explain something very well on WhatsApp, but is there a proper explanation? Can they understand it? Because I think doubt, that feeling of maybe they're coming back. Maybe they're not. Maybe they still love me. Maybe they don't. This is agony. Sometimes it helps to say it's like the difference between someone who loses a child and they find the body versus someone who loses a child and they never know where they went. They don't know where the body's gone. It's always terrible to lose a child, but it's even worse when you don't know what happened to the person that you've lost. And there's a version of this that happens in relationships where we literally, the person says, I really love you, I don't know, but I'm going. Really? Why are you going if you love me? And on and on in the middle of the night, it goes on and on. It's a nightmare. Please, if anyone's listening, do not do this to anyone else. It's not a good thing. And also, we have responsibilities towards people. I mean, it's not fair to fall in love with someone, have them in your life, know that they want a child, realize you don't want a child with them, know that they're 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, and you're still there. Get out. I mean, don't do this to somebody. Or that they're getting older, they're 50, 60, 70, and you're still around, but actually you want to leave. Well, don't hang around. It's always fascinating, isn't it? How you do something a bit wrong with a car. You drive, at 25 kilometers an hour in a zone, and immediately you have a fine, the police, there's a CCTV camera, etc., etc. And in love, yes, if you hit someone physically, so there are certain moments when, the law will get involved, public opinion will care. But a lot of situations, no one cares. You can do anything you like. You can be in somebody's life for 20 years. They think that they're a family, you're a family, etc. And then one day to the next, you simply say, I'm so sorry. I do apologize. I've fallen in love with somebody else. Goodbye. And that person just goes. Now, sometimes we can't prevent these things, but let's try and observe some of the rules of human decency as we try and maneuver. If you know that someone's not right for you, don't wait around in the hope that someone better will come along, but you'll only shift when they do. No, leave now, leave now. Don't keep 2 people or 3 people running, and don't. There are ordinary rules. We don't need to say them, but we don't need to believe in karma to know that what you've done may come back to you, or if it doesn't go back to you, it'll come back to somewhere. There's we do live in societies, so let's try and be kind.
I thank you for that. I fully agree. But is it healthy that this person become a stranger after a while? Or
look, it may. I mean, if somebody impacts us a lot, they will always be with us. Always with us. They won't disappear from our lives, our hearts. The question is, do we want to see them every day? Do we want to be in contact with them every day or regularly? And the truth is, it may hurt too much. If you love someone and knew everything about them and they were part of your life, and then they say, oh, we'll meet every month. I can't do this. If you want the whole of someone and then they give you, one afternoon every 6 months, you may say no, not because you don't want them, but because you don't want such a fragment of them. So friendships are possible when 2 people basically want the same level of each other, and that can happen. 2 people are like, well, look, we're not made for each other, but it'd be lovely to spend the afternoon every now and then. We could even go on holiday. It's fine. It's relaxed, but it's not always going to be possible. And I think the more in love with someone you are, the harder it can be to then accept a friendship afterwards, because a friendship seems so pale next to what you really wanted. So the best setup for friendship is ironically when you didn't love that much, when two people didn't love that much. 2 people were just, a little bit in love. And after all, one can be a little bit in love. It's not a paradox.
Are there any tips to unlove someone, or it doesn't really make sense to have a tips to unlove someone, or is it just taking time? Because we tend to just remember the good things. So sometimes we can meet someone that is, I don't like the expression, but I'm going to use it still, toxic. I hate this because, everybody became toxic. But, they are like real toxicity sometimes. And so you want to get away from that person, but yet you remember just the good things about that person when you leave. And so are there any tips for you to actually remember all the flaws and all the wrong things that were going on with that person?
Sure. I mean, I think, I think what you need to do is immediately set up a file on your computer called something like, problems with A, B, C, whatever, whoever the person is, and literally list, I received this text message, when I was going to see their mother, they did this, when we came back from the holidays, they did that, etc. I mean, it's not a grievance sheet just for the sake of it. It's actually usefully trying to remember that this is a three-dimensional person and there were genuine problems. And therefore, because a lot of people, they're with someone, they break up with them because there are difficulties, and then 6 months later, they're back together with them. Why? Not because the difficulties have been solved, but because the difficulties have been forgotten, literally forgotten. We are sentimental. I mean, it's why, I always find myself going on holiday. I think I love the sunshine. I think I love the beach. And then I go to the beach and actually I'm too hot and there are flies and I get distressed and I can't take it. But then I get back to London where I live and it's grey, etc. And within a month, I want to go back to the beach because I've literally forgot. I'm so stupid that I just keep forgetting the problems of me and the beach. I actually do not get on the beach. Now, what I should do is keep a file saying, the problem with St. Lucia or, St. Bart's or wherever it is, there's lovely islands that people go to, is that I get hot and a film and a photograph and a testimony. I should talk to the camera going, I'm unhappy. It's midday. I'm on the beach. I'm too hot. I'm in a bad mood. I can't think. I've lost my glasses. I can't go swimming, etc., etc. And if we did this, we would book less holidays. But a version of this exists, of course, in love too. So, when I'm with, Alice or Bénéris or whoever it is, we fought about this. She couldn't tolerate my socks. I couldn't tolerate her taste in books. She hated my music. Blah, blah, blah. It was the reality. Keep it in mind. So we're too sentimental.
I wanted to talk about children also, because those have two impact. I mean, two impact, many impacts, I guess. But I was thinking about two. First is the separation between, sorry, I'm focusing on heterosexual couples, but between the man and the woman, it happens quite a lot. And also, sometimes on the opposite side, you stay together for the children. You know what I mean? And I was wondering if you have any advice for young parents, how do you overcome this situation of being separated as a couple somehow because of the child?
I mean, I think you have to accept that there is a tragic structure to this, that there is a loss. There is a loss. There is a gain. You have a child. There is a loss. Your relationship will suffer. I mean, any couple that expects not to suffer, they should immediately be warned they will suffer. They will suffer in terms of intimacy, in terms of time, etc. And there is a kind of psychoanalytic problem here, which is that as you become parents, your own associations of what a parent is will come into play. And so your wife or your husband or whatever, co-parent or whatever you want to say, gets some associations of the father and the mother. And so, there are all kinds of, and then sex becomes harder because it's harder to have sex with someone who somebody else has called mother or father. I mean, partly because there is this unconscious wish in the Freudian sense to have sex with a mother or father. If somebody, is called mother or father by your child, you will push them away a little bit more because, there is uncomfortable association. So all sorts of taboos come around. So yes, it's very complicated and couples need to know this. And, look, it's, obviously we live in a society where we want everything. We want, wonderful jobs and time. You want to have a fantastic job and lots of time for yourself. Well, what do you tell people? You tell people, if you want to have, I always say there's no such thing as work-life balance. People talk about work-life balance.
I fully agree.
Anything that's worth doing is going to unbalance your life, but it's worth doing, but it will unbalance you. You want to write a book. Well, other things are going to have to suffer. It's good to write books maybe, but other things will suffer. So we just need to be ready.
And so the advice is being ready, just like knows
ready for tragedy. Brace yourself for tragedy. It's a stoic advice. Tears. There are tears coming your way. Tears and loneliness and sadness. And sometimes those tears and loneliness and sadness are a little bit better because we know that it's normal, we're not alone, and we were prepared.
And on the other...
Best I can do for you.
Sorry. And on the other side, those people saying we are going to stay together, or I'm staying because of the children, and sometimes in very unhealthy relationship. What do you think of that? Because...
I mean, look, our romantic... I mean, I'm not talking about the very difficult situation. Let's not talk about, violence, etc. Obviously, that's not a good idea. But let's say the ordinary compromised relationships. Obviously, we like to mock compromise. We like to say compromise is bad, we must never compromise, etc. Let's argue a little bit in favor of compromise. We have to compromise sometimes. Maybe sometimes we don't have a million options. There are some financial constraints. Maybe a child really does need us, etc. Maybe there are some wonderful people compromising. Maybe we all compromise. We all compromise in our lives. So it's okay to compromise. But there are degrees of compromise. There are levels of tolerance. There are levels of wisdom around compromise. But the concept of compromise, maybe. So maybe we will need, at some level, to compromise for a child. It's not automatically the worst thing. Let's rid of ourselves of this romantic idea of the moment you compromise, no, it's always better not to compromise. An uncompromising person is always better than compromising. Really? Is that true? I think then we're in a kind of totalitarian system where only the extreme is possible. Obviously, a lot in the world that encourages that point of view. So let's stick it up for compromise.
And okay, great. And I love that. And how do you know that you've tried everything, that you've been pushing enough that maybe it's not worth pushing more and that you have to leave?
I think you will know. You will know. I think it's good to try everything, because if you don't try everything, you have regrets.
Yeah.
The advantage of staying a little bit longer than you might in a relationship, maybe you spend 6 months longer going to relationship therapy, having discussions, trying, and your friends are going, oh my God, just leave. And you go, no, I'll try one more time. I'd really, one level, it wastes your time, maybe, but another level, it saves time afterwards because it means then that you go, that ex, I tried everything. I don't have regrets because I really know I tried everything. And I think that probably is the time to leave. The time to leave somebody is when you've tried everything. And then that will mean you can sleep. You can still be sad. You can still be very sad that you've had to leave somebody that you tried everything with. But you will be less sad for less long and less intensely. Yeah.
Also because what you were explaining before, that the worst case scenario is not knowing, not understanding. So if you've been trying...
Exactly. Or thinking, if I just tried a little, if I just tried this thing, if I just spent more time with them or just was more patient in this area. And these are very haunting thoughts. So if you've given yourself the chance to go back or stay in and try that kind of listening, that kind of thing, and you've seen it didn't work, then, as I say, you'll be able to leave and you'll go, it really was sad, but I cannot see a way in which this could have worked. And if a partner ever wants to get back together and says, oh, we could get back together, you can say, I would love to. I really would love to. I can't. I know too much. I tried everything. And then it will be sad and you may cry with the person and it'd be tender and beautiful, but you will not go back because you will know that you can't.
But what about those people saying, but I've changed, but they haven't? That situation where people say, yeah, I've changed, and they'll do some efforts during, a few months and then, go back to their flows because they haven't changed.
Well, that's very complicated. I mean, I think we need to be very skeptical. Have they really changed? Mm-hmm. Maybe we want to, look at many, many situations, but sometimes we may feel, there's enough here. I've got enough time. They're worth it. They're worth me taking a risk on seeing if they've changed or not. But sometimes, other times we think, I can't, because if this went wrong again, the waste of time, the tears, the heartbreak, again, I cannot do this. So even if they change, I can't take the risk that they haven't. So that's something we need to discuss with ourselves.
And what about, you've talked a little bit about that. What about cheating in our modern society? We were talking about, open relationship, but not everyone is an open relationship, hopefully. But there is cheating going on. How do you deal with that? I mean, I know the American way would be to say the truth, when I guess the Latin way is probably not. But can you pardon your partner for cheating, and how do you do that?
I mean, look, I certainly don't subscribe to the view that there is one response to cheating and only one, which is to, throw the lover out. I mean, which is something you hear about. I think you want to listen to why cheating happened. And there are definitely versions of cheating that ironically are to do with wanting to be connected with your partner. You want to be connected with your partner. You love your partner. They, for whatever reason, are not connecting to you. And what you then do in response is to cheat with somebody else. Not because you love somebody else, but because you actually want to connect to your primary partner but cannot. So there's then a sort of irony if the partner you've cheated on then turns around and says, right, well, get out then. And the real thing you want to say to them is, I don't want to get out. Actually, I want to do the opposite of get out. I want to get in. I want to get properly in with you. That's why I cheated. That's a very, very complicated message. But if you're able to do that, and it's rare. But if that is able to happen, then that can be very beautiful and a real chance for growth. So, we need some nuance here for sure.
When we started discussing, you were talking about craziness. And I was wondering, is that craziness can help you build a beautiful couple? Like you will face the craziness of the other at some point. And hopefully, not too boring. But it means that, and no, not it means, but I was wondering, how can it help you building a beautiful relationship even after that? Meaning that craziness.
I mean, it all has to do with the attitude towards the craziness. Now, you see, what we call craziness could be really seen as a vulnerability. I mean, let's imagine somebody who has a porn addiction, right? So their craziness is they cannot stop looking at pornography all the time. Okay, so in a relationship, this could be a cause of terrible destruction, isn't it's a real problem for this person. But imagine a world in which the person is able to go to their partner and go, I got a problem. I've really got a problem. I've got a porn addiction. Help me. I don't know what to do about it. I think it's got to do with X, Y, or Z. I can't face my work. I've got some debts, and I'm drawn to the internet for this, and help me, right? It could be a conduit to greater intimacy, to greater closeness. It's like, I'm going to help you. This is going to be our problem. We're going to walk around it together, etc. Imagine somebody who comes to their partner and says, I have a problem with sex. I get frightened of sex. During sex, I feel invaded. I feel traumatized by sex. Can you help me? This can be strangely more intimate than sex. It can be more intimate than sex to say I've got a problem with sex. So it's not so much the nature of the craziness, it's how it's handled. Can your emotional problem guide you to share it and discuss it with a partner so that it becomes a route to growth, kindness, mutual compassion? And it definitely can be. Definitely.
What is the one question that people never ask you about love and that you think is like vital or super important to understand?
I don't know. What do they never ask me? I just don't know. I mean, look, many of the things, I've not many people have said to me, the Oedipus complex, what is it? And how does it apply to love? Or sexual perversion, the exhibitionism, what is its relationship to ordinary relationships? No one's ever asked me that question. So I've been telling you some of the things that I've been longing to tell anyone. I've been answering it.
I'm very glad. And we started, your first answer was about society. And I was wondering, how do you think society should evolve to make sure that we improve the quality of our relationships? Is it just because of the imaginary in movies and shows or on songs?
I think we need to take a historic view that we've gone from arranged marriages, very short expectations, low expectations, very short lifespans, to a romantic view, which is very high expectations, but very little technique behind the expectations. And now we're moving towards the beginnings of a psychological age when we understand the contribution of therapy and the therapeutic to helping us to understand the role of the past and of childhood in the evolution of adult relationships. So there's a history that we've been following. And I think that we need to keep building on the therapeutic insights. We need to keep developing what we know of relationships. But there's really only one way through it, which is through intelligence, through emotional intelligence. We're going to need to love more and more as emotionally intelligent beings. I think this is the future for us.
Can we be over-therapeuticized?
No, we can only be wrongly therapeutized. and that we can be. It's like, can we think too much? No, we can't think too much. We can think wrongly, but we can't think too much.
Okay.
So I think that's what people mean when they say, you can have too much therapy. It's really, my friend went to therapy and they're still an idiot. That's what they're trying to tell you. And that can happen, both because therapy is not a medicine that you swallow. It's a two-way mutual process and it can go wrong. And also many therapists are terrible. They are terrible. It has to be said. There are a lot of people. Therapy is a good therapist is an amazing thing. A good therapist is like a great writer, a great painter. There are many people who paint, only a few who really paint well. There are many people who, go cycling, only a few top cyclists. Same thing with therapy.
How do you know that you are facing a good therapist?
You have to try them out. I mean, you have to. It's really very, very individual. And it's very difficult. And therapists they can be very abusive, to use a word, towards their clients. I don't mean sexually in any obvious way, though that as well. But that's a minority. The majority is just that they impose a worldview on a client that is not suitable, and this happens a lot. The majority of cases.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Alain. That's so that's just so great. The podcast name is Vlan, so I would like to know what you want to open the door or close the door to.
Look, I want to close the door to the less useful versions of anxiety. I think the most beautiful thing in life is to be calm. And the most horrible thing in life is to be anxious, to be panicked. I think really what we all long for behind the fantasies of money, of fame, of love, etc. Really, what do we want is we want to be calm, as calm as we were when we were a newborn baby. We just had a feed. We go to sleep. We're at peace. And I think like everyone, I want to be at peace in a very noisy and agitated world.
Nice. And you don't want to close the door to anything?
I want to close the door to the noise, the anxiety, the hatred, the confusion.
Actually, I did an episode of podcast with Mark de Smet, and he made me realize that most of the noise is inside and not outside.
That's
and
true.
I thought it was so interesting.
Although I would say that the noise inside was once a noise outside.
Interesting.
It is a historic noise.
Yeah. Okay. And I was wondering also, what are the next topics that are exciting you for the future? What are you exploring now?
I mean, look, I run this organization called the School of Life, and we have a YouTube channel and all sorts of things. And we're constantly really exploring emotional life and our life as emotional beings. And it's an enormous topic. In a way, it's narrow, but it's also hugely deep. And I just look forward to, discovering little parts of this giant canvas, of dark canvas, just exploring new parts of our psyche. And every time that I understand a little bit of something new, I feel a little bit lighter and more energized. That's my mission in life.
I love that. Thank you so much, Alain. That was amazing. Ce podcast a été monté et mixé par le studio Plink, qui accompagne Vlan depuis ses débuts. Donc, si vous avez besoin de vous faire accompagner par de vrais professionnels sur toutes les étapes de votre podcast de marque, de l'idée en passant par l'enregistrement, qu'il soit audio ou vidéo, le montage, le mixage et la diffusion, n'hésitez pas à faire un tour sur leur site web. C'est plink.studio, plink.studio. Merci d'avoir écouté Vlan. Si vous avez aimé l'émission, n'hésitez pas à mettre des étoiles sur vos plateformes de podcast préférées. Vous pouvez aussi partager l'épisode sur vos réseaux sociaux, Instagram Stories, Facebook, LinkedIn, où vous voulez. Je suis Grégory Pouy. Vous pouvez me retrouver sur l'intégralité des plateformes sous le nom Greg from Paris. Si vous avez des idées pour des invités, si vous avez des commentaires, n'hésitez surtout pas à m'envoyer un message. Allez, merci et à bientôt.